I had a nickel for every single time I bought into chasing the carrot of opportunity based on someone else's outcome, like you'd laugh. Like it's crazy, but that's what we do when we don't have that internal compass attuned to what feels for us, which is distinct from you, from me, from Charlie, from Sid, like whoever. It's only unique to us. And that is part of our journey on this planet.
Absolutely. It reminds me of Abraham Hicks talks about like, if you get a really nice, like exotic sports car, you actually don't want to take the boring, predictable path from point A to point B, where you're stopping at every red light and the speed limit is like 35 miles per hour. What you actually want to do is you want to take it on the windy road. You want to see how it handles the turns. You want to explore the edges. Hey, welcome back to the show. I'm super excited for today's episode. Before I dive in, I have to say I'm blown away that listeners like you have made this a top 25% global podcast. As a way to give back and provide insane value for free, I'd like to invite you to take my Money Wounds quiz. In just 6 questions, you'll get insights into your relationship with money that will feel so accurate. And then you get access to my free masterclass on how to heal your money wounds. Just go to moneywoundsquiz.com to start. Hello. Welcome back to the show. I am sharing today the second in the 4-part LinkedIn series that Kat Burns and I are doing together. And the series is titled Our Favorite Business Practices That Would Get Us Kicked Out of the Boardroom. And specifically in this second session, we talk about ditching the business rules and what to follow instead. And I think this is so important because when we become entrepreneurs, even though we're our own boss and theoretically we can blaze our own trail, we find that we're often still following someone else's map, someone else's trail. We're still following a lot of the rules that we've followed in business up until that point. And so even just being aware of them so that you can start to decide, do I still want to do it this way? And if I don't, then what? Because often we're scared to give up the rules because then it feels, oh gosh, then what happens? And so knowing what to follow instead and how to do that is really helpful. And I particularly love this session because when we talk about following our inner guidance, it's so individualized. And it was really fun for me to hear from Kat on what it feels like for her when she's following her inner guidance system. And then I got to tap in and try and verbalize for me what it feels like when I'm following my own inner guidance. So I know that this is going to be so transformational and that there are so many aha moments ahead. So let's dive right in.
I am Kat Burns and I am a coach, a guide. I work with women who consider themselves creative women. I help remove blocks and struggles and strife. I love to help create a world of empowerment and strength with women around me in my life. And so this series for me is important because it's talking about things that we as women go through on a day-to-day basis. It's the struggles that we've all dealt with. It's like the history of coming into our own bodies and our lives. And I just really am excited to join in this conversation.
Amazing. Welcome. I'm so happy that you're here and that you're co-hosting this series with me. I'm Emily June Wilcox. I'm a money healer and business mentor. I work with many 6- and 7-figure female entrepreneurs, and we work on balancing masculine and feminine energy, really practicing life first living while building our fempires. So we want the money, but we want to really enjoy the journey into wealth, which can be very radically different than what we've experienced, especially if we have a corporate background where we might not love what we're doing, but we're getting paid very well. And oftentimes we go into entrepreneurship and then we love what we're doing, but we don't love the pay. And it's like, how do we combine those two things? That is the intersection of where I love to work. And what I have found, and I think you have found as well, Kat, is that there's so much unlearning and undoing that has to happen first in order for us to really love what we're doing. And so that's what we're here to talk about today is ditching the business rules. And like, why do we want to ditch them? But then what do we do instead? Because we also don't want to feel like, great, I threw out one set of rules and now I have no idea what to do or what to follow. And I'm just like floundering around.
Yes, which is what I can definitely relate to that.
Yeah. And so let's talk a little bit about ditching the business rules. And I'm curious for you, has it been a process of recognizing that, oh, there's still a rule here? Why am I following it? Do I want to follow it? Or I know some people take more of a rebellious path where it's just, here's the whole book and I'm lighting it all on fire and I'm totally blazing my own trail. What was it like for you to stop following the traditional business rules?
I love the question because I was option number one of the two that you gave, where I always felt like I followed the rules to my detriment, I would say. I was the person that didn't want to get in trouble, wanted to do things right, always wanted to get ahead, was like, I know I'm destined for success and there's something that's available to me, but like I have to do it in this very specific pathway. And I attribute a lot of that to a very masculine upbringing. I'm so grateful for my family and I love my dad, and my dad was like the breadwinner and taught us to be strong and that we had to work hard and get a job and support our families and do the very traditional role. Like you get a job, you find a job that you like, that you can do for 30 years until you retire. And then that's what you do. And you sacrifice for your family and you sacrifice so you could have security and stability. And for me, it really was like, what can I find that I like enough that I want to do, like the foreseeable future, i.e. the next 30 years. And then how do I apply that to a place where I can climb the ladder and then somehow get to this place where I make enough money to live and I can support my family and be the breadwinner and blah, blah, blah. So I had a very, I would say, straight and narrow traditional upbringing of how that it was ingrained in me. And I'm grateful because all that masculine, I'll just call it masculine for the sake of this conversation. We can dive into what that looks like later. But the doing energy of having to follow the rules, having to do things right, that was great. And it got me to a certain point where I have amazing skills. I've done so many different types of work. I have a very broad portfolio of different types of things that I've done. Like I say, I'm a coach or a guide or a mentor now, but where I came from was like 15 years in a creative background as a producer and a designer, and like having all of these skills that you had to do in order to have something happen. So I have all of that, which is beautiful. But what it did was it led me to a place where it took me ages to figure out what it was that I wanted to do. I'm still looking inside of that. Like even introducing myself, I was like, I don't even know what to say. Like I just did it out. I was like, blah, 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 words, like, because there's always that part of me that could never find what fit, because there's so many things that I wanted to do. So that led me to going to 4 different universities with different majors and working as a producer and a designer and a creative director and a staffing manager and an event producer, like all these different jobs. And so while I was trying to follow the rules, I just found myself digging the hole a little deeper and having great skills, but not actually being able to create something that really felt like it was mine, that it was beautiful. And I'd say, I think around 2016, I broke the mold and was like, I'm going to become a freelancer. I'm going to create like this world. And then having to learn what that was like and to step into building a business of my own and trying to assert my value and to figure out what fit. But I was chasing the carrot of what I thought could make like my life work. And that really was a big struggle. So to come full circle, this whole thing was in service of me trying to do it the traditional way, but the traditional way didn't work for me. What was it like for you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm in Enneagram 3, which is like the achiever. I did really well in school, and understanding what other people want and doing that thing comes very naturally to me. And to the point where I didn't understand how other people couldn't do it. I'd be studying for the exam in college and then talk to a friend afterwards, and she'd be like, I didn't know that one. And I'm like, wait, how did you not know that was going to get asked? Like the way the professor was talking the other day, it was so clear that was going to be on the exam. But I just knew I could like really tune into other people and what was important to them. And so moving into entrepreneurship, I definitely still brought a lot of rules with me, not so much from corporate, although some of that, but also like business books, business podcasts. Like I really craved someone to give me the answer. And I think because entrepreneurship can be so tricky and you are like forging your own path, but that's scary. And you're like, but I want to take a path that someone else has at least already done, like the major like machete stuff. And then I can just come and put some bricks on there. And I was also hiring business coaches and joining masterminds and that kind of thing. And I think it is this fine line between taking shortcuts, right? Learning from people who have done something similar to what we want to do and not reinventing the wheel, but then not taking their way as the way. And that's continued to be the undoing for me. And often I don't even realize it until I have this moment where it's like, I don't want to launch a live program every month in my business. And then I'm like, but why do I think I have to? It's my business. Mm-hmm. Oh, because the mentor that I hired that was so successful, that's making $25 million every year, is teaching live programs all the time and constantly promoting the next thing. And so I just thought that I had to do that to be successful, when actually that was probably one of the very things keeping me from success, because I didn't really want to do it. And so I was doing it and not getting the results that I wanted. And that's that feedback loop that helps us to see where things aren't in alignment so that we can get back to like our truth and actually get back. Oh, we just deviated from the trail. Hang on. Let's get back to the path that's actually ours.
I love that you said that, because I feel like this has probably been one of my biggest struggles in creating what it is that I see for my future in that sense. Like actually learning. I feel like being able to follow the inner guidance of what's next for me on a personal level has been a very different thing, right? Like, but it didn't come without struggle. Like I left Los Angeles when I was 35 and I decided to travel around the world. And I was like, I'm going to do this while I'm still young. And the legs work. Like I was seeing my mom getting a hip replacement. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to do this now because I want to do this while I'm still young. I didn't realize at the time that was my intuition, like guiding me towards something different. But I just had followed these hits, but they didn't come without the struggle. And so when you talk about like moving in different directions and trying to refine the path, that's probably been one of the hardest things for me, because it's always been me fighting against me to get there, right? It's always been me taking the advice of someone else as word, just like it was with my father. This is the way that you have to do it. This is the way, right? Like I think about it from that perspective, like there was no other way. I look back at my life and wonder, not from a place of regret or anything, but what would life have looked like if I had those hits, which I know I've had, and had actually followed them without having to fight against the current so hard to stick to what I thought was what I was supposed to be doing, what I was supposed to be doing, being the good girl, being the girl that behaved. And I would say like the good girl thing is a whole nother thing, but that's really what it comes down to. It's like these ingrained beliefs inside of us that keep us. And yeah, that's, I could go down a whole rabbit hole there.
Yeah, I think what you're speaking to is really important. And you talked about following inner guidance or intuition. And so when we talk about ditching the rules and what to follow instead, we're going to talk about what it looks like to follow your own intuition or your own inner guidance. And before we really dive into that, I think what you painted so beautifully is this picture of, if your intuition is your own inner compass, maybe some of us have actually used a compass. I don't know if that's like a lost art at this point, but I remember like 5th grade camp going out in the wilderness and they're trying to teach you. And then there's the traditional business rules, which are a compass. And there's 2 different versions of north. And so you're trying to decide, which one do I follow? Because this tried and true one, where there's people that I respect over here and there's lots of evidence of business success, is saying that north is this way. And when I look at my own compass, it's saying that north is this way. So which one do I follow? And that's why when you talk about good girl conditioning and everything else, like for women in particular, there is so much that has to happen before we can say, I'm following my own inner compass. Because it feels like we're letting down the people that we love and respect and care about, and maybe people that even have given us really good advice. It's hard to say, I love you and I'm not going to follow your advice without feeling like you're totally disrespecting them, or that we're going to lose their love or their approval, or we're going to lose our belonging in that community. So there's so much at play. And when we can get to a point where we even know what our intuition is, we know what it feels like, and then we follow it, that is a radical act of self-love and self-trust that I think we cannot overemphasize.
I couldn't have said it better. You really nailed it, because it's almost like that's when you win the game, right? Those moments where you can actually say, in the face of there being no one else that agrees with me in any way, shape, or form, I know I need to go this way. And so for me, how it's occurred is a fight for the right to have that happen. And what that looks like, it's shoving all of the other opinions out the window and saying, no, this is the way. This is where I'm going here. This is what I'm creating here. And seeing the results of that, but then also seeing where you deviate, even for this much of a second, off onto someone else's path, and just seeing it fall flat and then going, why is it falling flat? I just thought I was doing it. But no, you veered just a little off to the left on the path. Right. And then you went down a whole nother rabbit hole to bring yourself back to center. That's been probably one of the biggest struggles I've ever had in my life. And I'm very open and honest about sharing that, because it hasn't been easy. If I could go back and do life over again, gosh, would I do something different? But holy moly, like, these are the lessons that we need to learn. And I think especially as women, we're so used to following what everyone else says. We're so used to sitting there and saying, I have to be good. I have to respect people. I have to please people. Because if not, they're going to do. And there's a consequence associated to radically acting against the will of what other people expect of us. It could be disappointing for people. The amount of truth and love and confidence and courage you have to hold inside of yourself to say, no, thank you, I'm going to do this. It's a lot of times we don't do that. We don't give ourselves the luxury of following that. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. We'll get back to the episode in just a second, but this is too good not to share. Did you know that when you leave a review for the podcast and then send it to hi@emilywilcox.com, you get a free month of Wealthy and Woo Club? This is my membership that takes you on a journey to building the bank account of your dreams. Doesn't matter your occupation or gender. If you're someone who wants more money in your personal bank account, Wealthy and Woo Club is where it's at. Just write a review for the show to get your first month free, or join directly via the link in the show notes for just $7 per month. And so for anyone tuning in, whether you're live right now or on the replay, I would love for you to just take a moment of self-reflection. Think about a time when you followed your own inner compass instead of someone else's, and share it in the comments. Because when we can see examples of that, it's a really important piece of building evidence that it's okay. And if it was safe for someone else and it worked out for them and it actually turned out to be a really pivotal moment, wow, maybe it's okay for me too. So drop a story or an example in the comments so that you can inspire someone else and we can start to stack evidence here in this comment chain. And Kat, when you were talking about noticing when you got just slightly off of your path and onto someone else's, the visual I was getting was a record player, and how when the needle moves just one groove, it plays a different song. And it's
oh my God, I love that.
We can feel so close. No, it looks the same. From 6 feet away, the record player looks exactly the same. And it's not until you go and you check and it's so close, but it's on a different groove. So of course it plays a different song than it does when it's on this other one. And it's like that fine tuning. I really believe that it's part of this human experience, this human school that we've signed up for. And so it's not that we're meant to nail the assignment every time. Like the assignment is to go off track and notice it and get back on track, and veer off track and then notice it and get back on track. That is part of the trailblazing in the adventure that we're on. And it doesn't make us wrong or broken. It actually means we're doing it right.
I love that you say that, because if I had a nickel for every time I made myself wrong for the times that I went off of the track. And I love that analogy because it's so true. It can be so fine line, right? Like just so slight. I can even just recall, I was literally just 2 hours ago at lunch with some of my friends, and I was just saying where I just did one little veer off and then was like, whoa, girl, bring yourself back. But like the fact that now I can celebrate the feeling and going, wow, I was like, I actually was a little off track last week. I said yes when I should have said no. The consequence is present. But what does consequence even mean, right? There's only an action and then a reaction, right? We make a consequence, a reaction that has negative effects. And yes, sometimes there are negative effects, but a lot of the negative effects are what's going on up here. The way that we like look at ourselves and feel about ourselves and think about how we are. If nothing else comes from this conversation, which I already know has been really beautiful and powerful, but like the permission to go off track, and the permission to allow yourself to say, wait a second, I'm going to come back here. Wait a second, I'm going to just veer back onto the path that's right for me. If that's the one thing that anybody can take away today, this is the permission that all women need.
Yeah.
Because it's so inherent within us to follow the other trails because they're already paved. I can't tell you how many courses I've signed up for online to grow my 6-figure, 7-figure business, like from a coach where you do the $1,200 product and you do it in a Facebook group. And if I had a nickel for every single time I bought into chasing the carrot of opportunity based on someone else's outcome, like you'd laugh. Like it's crazy, but that's what we do. And we don't have that internal compass attuned to what feels for us, which is distinct from you, from me, from Charlie, from Sid, like whoever. It's only unique to us. And that is part of our journey on this planet.
Absolutely. It reminds me of Abraham Hicks talks about like, if you get a really nice, like exotic sports car, you actually don't want to take the boring, predictable path from point A to point B, where you're stopping at every red light and the speed limit is like 35 miles per hour. What you actually want to do is you want to take it on the windy road. You want to see how it handles the turns. You want to explore the edges of what this powerful vehicle can do. And that's us. We're the powerful vehicle. And our reptilian brain that is responsible for keeping us safe and responsible for keeping our body within 8 and 99 degrees for our survival doesn't want us to color outside the lines. And that's very normal and very appropriate. And that's that part of our brain doing its function. But what our soul wants is to be the exotic sports car that's going on the twists and turns and speeding up really fast and seeing if we can stop on a dime. Like we don't want the well-worn path. And the more that we can make peace with that, be like, okay, buckle up, brain, because this is not going to feel as safe as you want it to feel. But it's going to be fun. It's going to be an adventure.
I love that. I love that you say that, because the truth is there is so much conditioning up here that teaches us that it has to be a certain way, right? All of our conditioning, the way we were raised, our religion, our society, the media, like we've been absorbing information since the day we popped onto this planet. And the way we see the world is we're wearing thousands of pairs of glasses, right? So you can't even see anymore because the path in front of you is so skewed a lot of the times. So getting to this point where you can actually take off these beliefs that you believe because they're not yours anymore, and sit with, wow, I was living this way because my 5th grade teacher told me that this was how I fell in love or whatever. And I've been believing that this is the way just because of that. Or for me, a lot of it was religious based as a young person. If you're good, God will be good. If you're bad, God will punish you. These like little like things that like I can sit with now and be like, what? Like, God, no, there's love here. Like, it's a very different conversation. But these are all these beliefs. This is the unlearning of the conditioning. It's the practice of surrendering to that those thoughts will always be there. They're automatic. They're part of what was ingrained in you from the time you were a child. But what feels right inside is a completely different compass.
Yeah.
Do you know,
totally.
You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. So let's shift into that part of the conversation. So if we're agreeing that what we want to follow instead is our inner guidance, also called intuition, what do you think your intuition is, and how do you connect with it? How does it feel to you?
I was going to ask you that question, and you asked me first. I can tell you what it's like.
You're in the hot seat.
Yeah, and I'm good with that because, to be honest, like I said, it's been a very interesting, I don't want to call it a battle because I relate to it like a struggle, but the finding of what that feels like for me felt tumultuous at times because there was not the trust, because there was not that love and that support there for myself and what was there. The way intuition feels for me is a teeny little whisper that comes back here on the right side of my ear behind me with a knowing inside that you are going to do this, or this is the right way. And it's so subtle. It speaks in a whisper. I always say, like, your intuition speaks to you in a whisper. You can't hear it in a war zone. Because if the thoughts are thoughting, which thoughts will always thought forever, we can never, ever get the thoughts to go away. But if there's so many thoughts up here, you can't actually hear the little voice inside that has the knowing. For me, it's required learning how to meditate, learning how to quiet my mind, learning how to get outside in nature and connect, put my roots in the ground, put my feet on the actual dirt and feel roots growing into the ground and sitting with the life force energy of the earth and just feeling into what feels good, what brings me joy, where does my heart want to take me, and learning that process and practicing what that feels like and making it a deliberate practice to connect in that way. Actually making sure that I have time for exercise, that I have time to walk out in nature, that I have time to sit with my feet in the grass and connect with myself. Because the more time I spend doing that, the more I'm able to hear that voice, as opposed to the thoughts that will forever thought in my brain. I've got so many up here, and I bless my brain. I'm so grateful. I'm very smart. I've learned a lot. I have lots of skills, but this brain will go off the rails if I don't have the time to connect and quiet. That's how it occurs for me. How does it occur for you?
I love this because for me, it's actually so different. And
I love that.
And both are true. And so before I share what it is for me, I want to say for everyone listening, first of all, drop in the comments what your intuition feels like for you. Because again, we're going to get a bunch of comments and it's all going to look different and it's all correct. Oh, yeah. And I think sometimes there's this misperception that some people are very intuitive and some aren't. What I would say is we all have the same capacity, but some are more practiced. And it's like learning another language. You've got to take some time and practice and get the feedback and kind of figure out how it speaks to you and how you can best listen. And that's an individualistic process. I do believe that human design is a really good tool to help and start to understand how it feels to you. So for me, that's been very confirming and helped me to like further refine my skills. But often my intuition, it's the thing that feels right. It's not necessarily that it feels exciting or even necessarily that it feels scary, but sometimes I will feel scared but what my intuition is guiding me to still feels right. And the way right feels in my body might be totally different than in everyone else's body, but there's just this steadiness and this trueness to it that is unavoidable. Like I can still go through all the range of emotions of whether I'm going to do this thing or not do it and be afraid about it and wanting to talk through it and all of that kind of stuff. And yet there's this hum below that of just, this is truth and this is what's right. And it's a very steady, no matter what's going on with my emotions. I also find that when I'm being guided by intuition, things that aren't for me, I will notice myself either feeling contracted by, like definitely like receiving an email and it's before I even open it, I already feel like, oh, I don't want to read this. It's not a logical thing. It doesn't make sense. Sometimes what's in the email is still even like something that should feel good on paper, but it just doesn't. So I'll find myself just avoiding that thing or procrastinating that thing. And those are signs for me that it's not for me. When I'm moving in flow with what I'm being intuitively guided toward, it can feel like a lean in energy. It can feel like expansive. I get curious about it. Often things that are for me intuitively will come at me multiple times. And that's one of the ways that I know that it's actually for me is I'll get that confirmation. Like I just recently read a business book and I very rarely read business books. But one of the reasons I knew it was meant for me and I was being intuitively guided to it was that I heard about it like multiple times in different ways from different people. And each time I was getting a, curious, lean in kind of feeling, not a contracted feeling. Because a lot of times people will recommend a book to me and it's like an immediate no. I can just feel in my body like, not going to do it. So that's the way that intuition comes through for me. Of course, it's very feelings based as it is for all of us, but we all have our own little ways of reading the Braille, so to speak, and interpreting those feelings. And that's perfect. And that's the way that it is meant to be, is that we practice and we refine until it's like, I don't really have the words to share it, but I just know.
Yeah. I love that. It's interesting. There's some similarities with me as well, like that they're showing up in the feeling of leaning in. Now, people have done like kinesiology and muscle testing and things like that, and actually being able to feel into what's right or wrong or things like that. But what I really want to press on, which I thought was interesting that you brought up this idea of it feeling right, because I feel like coming from our everyday life, we have a lot of sense of rightness ingrained into the modern day society. How do you determine the difference between what is right, but not from a moral context? Because a lot of people are like, oh, because I relate to the idea of feeling that feels right. Like when I hear that little tiny voice that talks, that's the one that I listen to versus the thoughts, because that's how it is for me. And that's the one I know is right. And when I don't listen to that one, then the reactions / consequences or whatever you want to call them happen.
Yeah.
But if we are stuck inside of the mind and we operate from a very masculine place a lot of the times, because intuition is a very feminine feeling. We have masculine and feminine polarities inside of both of us, right? Like in all human beings. And feeling into the intuition, it's a feeling, right? It's not something that you can tangibly write on paper. There is no right or wrong from the proverbial sense, right? You can't say one is green light and one is a red light. Yes. So for the people listening, like, that aren't really familiar with how the rightness feels from that non-moral place, what kind of guidance and basically like advice can you give for someone on what that rightness feeling is, discerning from the right versus wrong?
Yeah. So the rightness from my intuition often will require me to do something that bucks the rightness of social conditioning. And so it's a very different kind of rightness. It's like when I knew that I was meant to go to Egypt, that just felt true and right. And what it meant was that as a very connected mother, I needed to leave my family for 8 days, and I needed to have that conversation with my husband, and that I was going to be spending the amount of money that I think a lot of people probably spend on like a year's worth of vacations on one trip just for myself. So none of that felt right from a societal perspective. It just felt right for me. And I had to do the scary thing, which then, of course, like my husband was totally supportive. My kids did amazing while I was gone. It all worked out, but it required my courage to go against societal conditioning and follow what felt right and what felt true to me. And I could go on and on with that. It's like my intuition guided me to take 6 weeks away from being CEO of our agency. And none of that felt good from on paper. Like my human didn't want to do that at all. I felt like I was abandoning the people that work for me and with me. I felt that I was like risking my belonging. It confronted everything I believed about my worth being tied up in my work. And what was I going to do for 6 weeks? So all of that felt so scary. And that steady, true rightness of the voice of intuition never wavered. And so I was brave enough to follow it. So I find that it's actually pretty rare that the rightness of our intuition lines up with people pleasing.
It's really true. And I think it's really worth noting in this conversation, because I think we are so bred to not trust that inner guidance because of our conditioning, because of the way we were raised, because of our culture and our society. Like, I just think about how much right and wrong from a moral context has influenced my life, and how much I've had to unlearn what that feels like, and how I'm still unlearning it every day. Like, I have to have a really uncomfortable conversation in a couple of days because I went down the path that was like, yeah, I'll do this. And then I was like, oh wait, no, I just won't. But it's really, again, coming back to that, getting back on path, like going back to getting on your track, and how rewarding it feels in the end when you can hear what's true for you as opposed to what everyone else is creating for you. And I think a lot of people that have been bred into this traditional 9-to-5 corporate environment where there are very strict rules from a very strict perspective, right? Like, I'd say strict, but like traditional, let's call it. This is the way it's always been done for the most part.
Yeah.
And it's designed that way for the purpose of what it is, right? There's a reason why that was what was ingrained in me. That was what my father learned. That's what his father learned before him. There's reasons why there's been those rules following all this time. And so nothing about that is comfortable. Nothing about that is, yeah, I'm just going to go do exactly not what I thought I was going to do or what everyone else thought of me. But that takes an enormous amount of self-trust building, of really connecting with who you are and what you stand for and where you want your life to go. Do I want my life to look this way, or do I want it to look this way? Because it will be okay either way, right? You're going to still live, like, hopefully in either direction, but which one is going to bring you the joy and fulfillment and the ease that you are searching for, which is what I think all of us are really searching for at the end of the day, is that ease and freedom and happiness. Where do you have to say no to the things that have always been the way they always are, so you can see that nothing is the way that it actually is?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Totally. Yeah. And I think we see two different paths. We do see that traditional path of where there's like this passed down knowledge. And so then there's a hesitancy to change within an organization or a system because there's a way of doing things. And then there's this other way, which we see a lot of times in coaching and mentorship and in business books, where someone did do something different and it worked really well. And then what we're buying into ends up being their system or their framework. And even Gemma said in the comments that she also put herself on a course ban. She was relating to your comment that you bought courses.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I can't see the comments today. So
That's okay.
I just was thinking, yeah, thank you.
But here's the key thing that's missing. And I don't know I think sometimes it is innocently missing, and sometimes it's missing because it's harder to monetize, which is that mentor, that coach. The first thing they did was they followed their intuition. And then out of that was this new way of doing things that worked super well for them. But it's much easier to monetize my 10-step path to $1 million than saying step 0 is following the intuition and doing whatever that says, which may be totally different than my 10 steps.
Absolutely. It's so important that any entrepreneur, any aspiring entrepreneur, any person that is feeling like they're called to do something knows that just because somebody did it one way doesn't mean this is the way, right? And that it's sneaky. Marketing is really sneaky in a lot of ways. And especially if you don't have that you're not in tune with that guidance. If you're not sitting here with the what feels right, inherently right within you, it's so easy to go off on that path a million ways. It's so easy to put yourself in a place where it's like chasing the carrot. A lot of my story is I was chasing the carrot of opportunity because I just wanted to find what stuck. I still find myself chasing that carrot from time to time, thinking that, like I said, I have to go have this uncomfortable conversation, for example, because in my mind, there's still a tiny little carrot. Although most of it has been stripped away, there's still those moments where we go and veer off of the track because we think that's the thing that's going to do the thing. And it's a reaction-based system. So it's not even a reality-based, reaction-based system, if that makes sense. These are hypothetically, if I follow this path, then this will happen. But if that's not the right path for us, it's not going to get us anywhere. Yeah. And that is sometimes a hard pill to swallow, especially if you've invested time and energy into growing something. This is what I'm in the process of doing now. I can't call myself the coach that I was calling myself 6 months ago because it doesn't feel aligned. Yeah. And alignment is intuition based. I don't even know what to call myself yet, again, in this conversation, because I'm like, what is the thing that intuitively has me feel connected to me? Who am I going to be for myself in the world that feels aligned inside of me? And that is taking the time to discover. And I feel comfortable knowing that I can be uncomfortable not knowing the right way to address that just yet. But that feels aligned, that I'm moving and shifting. And I did things certain way that didn't work. I tried things certain way that didn't work, and it's okay. And so permission, again, for that is the biggest thing. I think anybody that needs to hear that permission, you have permission to veer off course. You're actually supposed to. And when you do, when you come back to yourself, it's so much more rewarding on the other side.
There's a quote from Ulysses S. Grant, and I don't know exactly how to quote it properly, but basically he's just, I would rather take the wrong action than no action. Because with the wrong action, I'll learn faster and we'll be able to pivot. And I really believe that. And so I would rather try some things out. And even if I buy the course or I take someone else's 10-step path to $1 million only to find that I hate step number 3 and there's just no way, it's like pulling my eyeballs out. Great. Now I have that feedback. And eliminating things and knowing what doesn't work for me gets me so much closer to what does work for me.
Absolutely.
It gives us things to respond to, which helps us to better fine tune along the way. So I think just to bring this home from a homework perspective, if this feels new-ish to you, or you're feeling like you're ready for a deeper version of what it looks like to stop following someone else's rules and to start following your own intuition, I would start in your journal and writing out all the times that you followed your own inner guidance and it worked out. Because you've got to bank that evidence. We've got to be able to trust ourselves. And it can be difficult to do that if we don't have top of mind 5 or 10 or 12 times where we did it and we got a good outcome. If you don't know your human design, I would recommend getting that. One of my clients, if you go to, I think her website is meetingyourmagic.com, and you can get your chart for free. You got to know your birthday and your exact birth time. But then the one piece of the human design chart, because it's a lot, the one piece that's essentially your kind of the way your intuition speaks to you is your authority. So look for what your authority is, and that'll help you figure out how to make decisions from a body first, feeling based decision paradigm. And then start playing with that. Start quieting the mind, listening, feeling, and noticing, is it a voice behind your right ear like it is for Kat? What does it feel like? What does it sound like in your body? And practice on the little things. Sometimes, like, if you haven't been in relationship with your intuition and using it to figure out what you want to eat for lunch today, or buy this house or sell this, it's like you want to go on that podcast you've been invited to, it's going to be really hard to just hear and follow and trust your intuition in a very high stakes situation. So absolutely, practice on the little things first, practice on the low stakes stuff so that you can build up that muscle and get good at interpreting this language of your intuition.
No, I was just saying, like, that you brought up the authorities, because some people feel it like in their sacral, right? Like in their gut, like some people feel it in their heart. Some people hear it. And so it really is important to connect with where that is inside of your body, right? Like I do have that little whisper, but the reality is there is a gut feeling. I have sacral defined. And I'm like, oh yeah, if it's a gut feeling inherently, that's like I could feel it go if I really wanted to think about the decision. And learning to even do that just on a very small scale was incredibly impactful. So you're right. That was just something I wanted to add, because it does show up in all different places, really, around the body. Yeah, absolutely.
So part 3 of our 4-part series is going to be on Thursday, August 24th at this exact same time, 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 Eastern. Is it 5 p.m. Lisbon time? Is that right? Yeah. And we'll be talking about unconventional manifestation practices. So getting into the feeling of your body is an important precursor for this next part of our series. We'll try to iron out the tech stuff so that we're actually live on the event page next time. But thank you so much for tuning in. Okay, I hope you loved that session as much as I did. And it would be so fun if you shared on Instagram and tag me and tag Kat, and then tell us, like, what does your inner guidance system feel like? I think that would be so helpful for everyone, and we'll reshare it and just get a whole chain of inspiration going. And I would just love to see more and more, especially women entrepreneurs, ditching the business roles, stop doing it someone else's way, and really start to get super aligned with the way that feels most exciting and most passionate and most aligned to you and your soul's mission. So I hope that this episode helped inspire you to do some reflection and find some of those ways that you can get rid of the old, get rid of someone else's way, and start blazing your own trail. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll talk to you soon. You are the best. Thank you so much for listening today. When you subscribe, review, and share this show, it's an important and free way to show your support. I'd also love to stay connected on Instagram. You can follow me at @MMakesMoney. And if you're curious about working together, head to explore.emilywilcox.com to learn more. Until next time, I'm sending you all the magic money vibes.